I want to bring in Schwab Network contributor JD Durkin to help set up the action today. All right, JD, let's start out with equity price action and where we sit now. I mean, it's been like record after record recently. What do you notice about? I mean, it just feels so different now compared to where we were a few months ago.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, we've talked about this last Friday, I think, here on the show, Diane, as we kicked off the 8 a.m. hour this time a week ago about the sort of short-term memory that a lot of investors seem to have, always going out of their way to very quickly put aside the bad news, find that silver lining, once again here contending with all-time highs. We did have a little bit of a pullback in equities earlier this week, and I wonder to what degree that was the market communicating its desire for Fed independence. Remember, we kind of had that intraday pullback on reports that the president would look to remove Jay Powell as chairman of the central bank. He very quickly pivoted and reversed on that within just a few minutes, and we saw equities kind of bounce back. Yeah. Overall, pretty consistent, obviously, as earnings season goes along. Still early on, but I think more encouraging news than not encouraging news out of the big banks, the major airlines, and a few of those key consumer-facing names that we've heard to kick off the quarterly earnings slate.
It's so funny that you mentioned the, kind of talk about the Fed chair this week and the market reaction to that, and the view that they didn't really want that. Whether I'm talking to someone down here or hearing from Kenny Porcari on email, he's like, the view is the Fed chair is not losing his job, and they weren't in favor of that. So we've seen some kind of calm returning and just momentum returning to the market. But in terms of equities, although we're sitting at new records at the beginning of this week, and now it feels like we're booking ending this week in crypto with momentum that started the week. Then there was turbulence throughout the week. You had the records in Bitcoin at the beginning of the week, and then the stumbling block with the political infighting about the regulation making its way through Congress to get to a point where we are now, where there is starting to be a framework around crypto. I'm curious to know what you think about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Back in Washington, there's kind of a joke for throughout the Trump administrations that Infrastructure Week was something that was always kind of talked about and never actually came to pass. We came into this week talking about so-called Crypto Week, and it took us a bit to get there, but we kind of had that late week momentum with finally, and it's not just Republicans, rather. This is bipartisan support for stablecoin legislation, for finally trying to put definitions on what is a security, what is a commodity. We think back to that era of frustration. How many lawmakers, how many institutional, how many retail investors had their issues with former SEC Chairman Gary Gensler? This finally, at long last, was the effort from the deliberative body of Congress to try and put the rules on the road, try and map out where exactly we go from here. We kicked off the week, Bitcoin peaking at 123. I think that was in Monday's session. They all kind of blend together here. And a little bit of a pullback since. We also don't want to forget Ethereum up at more than 20% week to date. Obviously, that is, they're significantly off of their highs. You got to go back to November 2021 to where they were really at their all-time highs. But it shows that it's not just Bitcoin. You do have a rotation of some other big cryptocurrency names. And I think for longtime enthusiasts, they're looking at stablecoin legislation. They're looking at this momentum out of Capitol Hill. They're saying this is the Trump administration this is the White House that we wanted to really support the space overall. And we got a lot of key names that are enjoying that boost, like Circle, which recently had its high-profile IPO here at the New York Stock Exchange. It has been off and running essentially ever since.
I know someone who is with that company and is just waiting for the lockup period to be over.
I'm sure.
For those people who were lucky enough to be a part of something like that, I mean, it's significant there. And I love the point that you made about Ethereum, because the question has been throughout this year is when would Ethereum start to catch up and, kind of claim that number 2 position more firmly behind Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has been the leader and has had momentum, but Ethereum has, had for a while yet to catch up in terms of that momentum. And so, I think that's a great point you made about the clarity that we're getting with the Genius Act, not to be confused with the Clarity Act, which would then clarify whether we should perceive this as a commodity or security. That's the next thing.
Yeah,
right?
And you could also see really to the degree that ETF inflows have driven a lot of this underlying price action, because obviously you still have many Bitcoin or cryptocurrency purists, they say, well, it's one thing to have a MetaMask and own the wallet, own the asset directly, but the world of ETFs, from the Grayscales and the iShares of the world, they obviously have really helped pave the runway here for more institutional adoption. It's a big part of the story. I can't imagine that story slowing down anytime soon.
I agree with you there. I mean, there's certainly some momentum there. It would be remiss of us not to get into some of the earnings that we have to chew on. Netflix was out after the bell yesterday. Investors will get their chance to react once we get the cash open later this morning. I mean, strong numbers there. But Netflix, to be fair, has been an outperformer year to date. What were some of your takeaways from Netflix?
Yeah, Q2 revenue growth of 16%. That's great. Raising full year revenue guidance. That's great. The stock under pressure, more than 1.5% coming into today. However, not so great. Obviously, it's a stock that's had an incredible run up. It's trading well above 1,200. It's a sort of stock, I think we talked about this last Friday morning on the show. You know, do you kind of get into the stock split conversation at some point here about the show, or about the stock, even to make it just a little more accessible to a retail investor, a 10 for 1 or something like that? So maybe not overall exactly the price movement that you wanted to see, but the stock has had such a terrific run up, and I think for the most part hit those metrics that analysts had been looking for.
Yeah, I mean, they did. And look, you've got a couple of analysts starting to put out their adjustments on it. Still constructive. For instance, Wedbush is raising its price target on Netflix to $1,500 from $1,400. They are still bullish. They're keeping an outperform rating on it. Morgan Stanley raising their price target to the same level, to $1,500 there. So they see more momentum to come when it comes to Netflix, even though it has been this outperformer compared to the S&P 500 year to date. And really quickly, I know we've got Amex out, American Express earnings out this morning as well. Gives us an indication of what the spending looks like for the well-heeled. What are some of your takeaways there?
Yeah, we always look under hood to see how those higher income earners are doing here. Record Q2 revenue of almost 18 billion, about 17.9 here for the quarter. Few key updates announced for the U.S. consumer and business platinum cards. And then let's keep the momentum rolling for institutional crypto adoption. The company announcing launching Coinbase One Card on the Amex network. Remember, we've talked so much the last few years about the railways for these major financial companies. To what degree would crypto be sort of absorbed by those names? We saw that big announcement out of Amex. Shares up fractionally here in pre-market today.
Thank you, JD.
Thank you.
Always great perspective. That's JD Durkin, Schwab Network contributor, joining us this morning for a look across earnings and crypto and beyond.